Welcome in, everybody. We're going to be covering ROMs today. We had done this recording live a few days ago. For some reason, the program I was using did not record it. So here we are starting fresh, moved everything over to this podcast system so that we could start keeping an archive of all these for people to access whenever they're out in the field working or traveling or whatever the case may be. A lot of us have gotten to where we listen to podcasts quite every day for education purposes or entertainment. If you find me funny, which I don't, but you may not like what I have to say, but I feel like I have a lot to offer. So today we're going to be talking about ROMs, which is a rough order of magnitude. And traditionally, a lot of people in the industry used to use not to exceed. Well, I need your not to exceed. I need your not to exceed. And guys would just spit out a dollar amount. That got a lot of contractors in trouble. A lot of people have been stuck with bills that went over and then try to stuck with this dollar amount. And so the industry over the years has evolved to doing a rough order of magnitude. So rough order of magnitude in a nutshell is a dollar amount, but it is tied to a specific scope and term of work, okay? This allows you to do change orders when things don't work out. I highly recommend that you guys utilize a few apps and programs to make this project look much more professional when you do your presentation to the client, because a lot of times consultants and adjusters are also going to see this, especially when we're talking large loss and commercial large loss in particular, okay? I've done ROMs on projects up to $50 million before, just for the mitigation and stabilization portion. It can get quite involved into building these out, okay? And some guys use square foot pricing. To me, that doesn't look as professional. It does help give you, if you know what your square foot pricings are for stabilization and for cleaning, removal, so things like that, then that's okay to kind of get you some preliminary numbers. Generally within 48 hours, most people, especially experienced clients, some clients aren't going to let you start until you have a ROM. But if adjusters and consultants show up in the job, they're going to expect that after 48 hours that you already have those numbers. And a lot of times, especially during catastrophic events such as hurricanes and floods and things like that, they're not showing up until day 4, day 5. They're going to expect to see that, whether it's provided by your client because you've given it to the client or from you. And if you haven't done it, they're going to automatically think that you're not very professional at what you do. That's going to be their first assumption. Okay. So it's important that you take your time and get this done real quick as soon as you get on the job site. Right after you've got the contract signed and you get things moving as a project manager, you need to be getting your ROM put together. Okay. So first tool I like to use, and I have one tool that I provide to anyone that wants to reach out to me free of charge, just like our terms and conditions. I know there are people that charge up to $500 for their terms and conditions. I'm not an attorney. Most of those people are not attorneys either, but I will give you samples and tell you to make sure you talk to your attorney before you incorporate them into your contract. And we'll cover those again in another podcast. But basically, the first tool I would use is a tool I like is called Measure Map. Okay. Measure Map is very simple. Some people like using the Google Map version of this, but Measure Map is great. It's free download. It's free to use. It's easy. I believe it was originally created for farmers to measure their fields and do plots, so on and so forth. I've used it probably for about the past, I guess, 5.5 years, 6 years. I actually had a roofer turn me on to it when I was doing a courthouse one time. And basically you can put in the address, or if you're standing on the job site and you have cellular service, and you actually has a website function as well. The app to me is a lot easier than their web form. But basically you can plot out the footprint of that building instantly. So now you know the square footage of the footprint of that building, within 30 seconds to a minute. It's that quick. Then all you have to do is go in, or have one of your guys go in and shoot the ceiling height. That way you can start getting your cubic airspace. Obviously, you're going to want to have walked the building or planning on walking the building. And that's a huge tool in starting to build your calculations. The next tool I like to utilize is obviously, I like Sitecorp Pro. Hopefully you already have it on your phone because it's no longer available. I'm trying to figure out what is going on with that. You cannot get that on at least the Apple Play Store. It may still be available in the Google Play Store. Some people like Phoenix. Some people even prefer I've been through that training as well. Whatever you have guidelines in your contract, as long as you're adhering to the ICRC standards, you're going to be fine. And just make sure you got your calculations for what you're doing. Are you drying if it's category 1? Are you stabilizing if it's 2 or 3, or whatever the case may be? All right. So then you're going to walk your project. Now you got your cubic airspace. You're going to walk your project. You're going to get some basic readings, some basic psychometrics, kind of get a good idea of what this project is going to take. Is there power? Is there no power? And then you're going to come back. Hopefully you have a program like Helix Go. Helix Go is very simple. We are a time and material project management software over here. But if you use something else, that's fine too. We're not here to, shove our software down your throat. We're actually here to educate and try to improve the industry as a whole. But the good thing about it is our program allows you to start putting in all this data. It will pull in the measurements. If you've done a DocuSketch or anything like that, you can go ahead and drop that in there. If you haven't pulled any measurements yet, then that's the reason I like Measure Map. And Claims has now got a sketch portion that they're releasing as well. So if you've had time to do that in the project, then that's even better. Your numbers are going to be much more spot on. But if not, you at least got the rough, quick ones that you can get with Measure Map. That's the reason I like it. It's very easy. It's down to earth. It's fast. It helps me pull basic calculations for stabilization, air exchanges per hour, so on and so forth. Then you got to start thinking in terms of actually building the dollar amount for your ROM, okay? Some people like to start there because they already know what they're going to do in their head because of experience. That's kind of where I like to start before I actually start putting the numbers in. Some people like to actually start with the scope of work, whichever thing is easiest for you. I highly recommend, the more fresh that you are or new to this, highly recommend you start with the scope of work. You've talked to the client, that you understand what they want, from your certifications and your experience what it's going to take to do the job, but then you start outlining your scope of work. But we're going to dig a little bit deeper to that in a minute. The great thing about Helix is you can put down, okay, I want to have one project manager. He's going to work 8 hours a day and it's going to take 2 weeks. Boom, you get your dollar amounts. Then you're going to use like your basic 1-to-10 ratio of supervisor to workers, and that workers can be certified, mitigation technicians all the way down to general labor. Sometimes I like to basically classify anyone. If you sit in some of my other classes I teach, if someone's using a saw or anything like that, then they're skilled labor. Okay, I'm sorry, at least while they're doing that type of task. If they're hauling trash today, then they can be general labor. But if they're actually got saws in their hands, I'm not handing a saw to someone I don't know understands how to operate it, because then I'm liable if they cut their arm off. Okay. So your 1-to-10 ratio is going to be a supervisor and then a mixture of mitigation techs all the way down to general labor kind of guys. Okay. Skilled labor, whatever the case may be. How many days? Within our program, you can also click that they're going to be receiving per diem at the rates that you built into your profile. Housing, if you're not traveling for this job, then you can turn those features off. It's going to automatically calculate their overtime. Whatever you've built in your profile, if you have premium working hours and prime working hours, it will try to get you as close to that. And this is just the ROM. The ROM is made to be an estimate, okay? Then you're going to start putting in your equipment. How many DHUs, how many deskets, how many generators, how much 2-aught cable, 4-aught cable, flex duct, lay flat, once you start getting into consumables. But on your equipment, you're going to go through and select which ones it is, how many for how many days, okay? I highly recommend that you obviously try to set a timeline that this job is going to take right on the front, your top head, especially if there's no power, because this is going to make a huge difference in your dollar amount that, you're going to be producing. So your ROM is based on 2 weeks, or your ROM is based on 30 days. If something goes beyond that time period, then it's ready for a change order. Next thing that you're going to be basically doing is moving from your equipment to your consumables. It's like, I think it's going to take 50 rolls of 6 mil poly bags. It's going to take some containments. It's going to take, for engineering controls, it's going to take and biocides, whatever the case may be that you think this project is going to take, you're going to list those in there as well. And the good thing with consumables, they're one and done. So if you think it's going to take 25 mop heads to get this job done, you put in 30 just to make sure you got enough wiggle room. Okay. Once you get that built out, you've got your dollar amount. Okay. Like I said, a lot of people like to start with the scope. The reason I'm discussing that last is just because there's a lot more into that. So basically your ROM is going to be a start off with, and the formality of it, it looks like the first page to me is like a letter. Okay. It's a letter to the client, hey, this is why we're here, as results of pipe burst, hurricane, flood, whatever the case may be. These are the conditions that we found. Here's any potential hazard situations. It was a flood, so we've got electrical issues there and shock, as a risk, that kind of a thing, whatever the case may be. If it's a flood, it's Cat 3, so you got contaminants. So mention that in there briefly, whatever those items are. And then list your psychometrics, indoor humidity upon inspection was at 68%, whatever the case was. And a few surface readings, walls are wet up to 4 feet, or walls were sporadic because it was roof torn off during a hurricane. You're going to keep this very sporadic. Okay. But cover enough information to where you're telling the story, which obviously is what we have to do in our industry. The better you tell the story, the better it's going to make sense later on. Then after you get beyond that section, you're going to move into your scope of work. This is going to spell out what you are and are not going to do. The sample that I provide to all the people I know is basically gives you a lot of things to kind of poke and prod your mind. Obviously, by no means covers everything. Every job is unique, as we know, and that's the reason consultants try to compare our jobs to other jobs and they lose in court every day because there are no two jobs that are exactly alike. Okay. So basically, structural mitigation. Are you cleaning? Are you drying? Are you removing? Are you removing drywall? Are you removing insulation? Does that include hauling it off? Does that include cleaning and decontamination at the end of it? You guys going to wear Tyvek suits? Are they not? PPE, all that kind of stuff. Water extraction. Did you have to extract water or was it already gone when you got there? And then you're going to get into, are you stabilizing or drying? Station is, especially after catastrophic instances and when there's no power, or if I'm doing demo, then I'm not drying those materials. I'm just preventing secondary damage from elevated humidity. So I'm stabilizing. I'm not there to dry. This is a Cat 3 loss, whatever the case may be. Environmental controls, you're going to have to put up containments. Most people do not realize it. ICRC, if you do not pre-clean before setting your air movers and DUs, then you're supposed to use air scrubbers as well. Okay, it's in the standard. A lot of people don't know that. So make sure that you include air scrubbers in there. And then that can be counted depending on if you're using it on recirculate or bringing in outdoor air on your air exchanges per hour if you end up using desiccants. Okay. So make sure you take all those things in consideration when doing your estimate. Environmental controls. Are you going to be pre-treating with antimicrobial because this is a sewage backup? You got to list all those things. Are you going to manipulate contents? Do you have to pack them out into a pod? Odor control, so on and so forth. The Helix Codes thing also has a calculation in it for fuel. So if you're going to have to use power distribution because you're using portable equipment or running desiccants, and so you got generators, whatever the case may be, if you have a generator on site, our program automatically calculates your approximate fuel cost. What I do each year is I've called around to find out what the going rate is for fuel, especially being delivered to the job site. I think most of what I've seen this past year is around $535 to $575. And so to include overhead and profit, I have it set in our program at $650, and we have all generators based on size and classification at 100% draw. Most people never achieve 100% draw, but that's what I base the fuel calculations on to give you a little more wiggle room in your pricing. It's much better to be a little bit higher and be able to turn in an invoice that's less than what you quoted, okay? It's always harder to go above that because your adjuster, once he starts getting your ROM, he's going to start setting reserves with the underwriters, letting them know, hey, this mitigation, guys, his invoice is going to be 10. I'm thinking recon's going to be about 15. So let's set the reserves at 30 million. Okay. And that's how it works. And so that way everybody down the line can start budgeting what they're going to have to do. And so if your ROM is off by a lot and you're not communicating that throughout the process with change orders and so forth, of things that were unforeseen or, power didn't get restored after a week, like the power company said, there was a bad transformer and back, and we all know during COVID, oh my gosh, transformers were, 6 months out sometimes. It was nuts. And so make sure you're taking all those. Are you going to be tarping the roof? Is someone else going to be tarping it? That can either be here, included in yours, in your scope of work, or it could be an exclusion. Then also you want to talk about that you're going to do daily monitoring. You're going to do moisture mapping. You're going to do all these types of things. Also highly recommend that you include in your price hygienist. Most people do not include the hygienist in their initial part. If not, you better put it in your exclusions. And then as soon as you get an estimate from your hygienist for pulling asbestos samples, that you provide that. Okay. And I got an interesting story for another podcast on why you should pull asbestos on every single commercial job. If you have any questions, give me a call. Mechanical, electrical, are you doing duct cleaning? Does the mechanical need to be inspected? How long has this water damage been here, especially after hurricanes? It may be a week before you can get in to even get access to this property to even look at it. And so then you've got Cat 3 already, most likely. You've got a bad situation there. You may have possible fungal growth going around everywhere. It's definitely a nasty job. Then you're going to have a section on how you're documenting. This is how we're going to document things. We use electronic documentation here, okay? Everything is digital, or we're going to do paper, but then we're going to put our estimate into this program. It's very brief, specific bullet points is all that the ROM needs to have. It don't need to go into, we're going to remove 2,135 square feet. No, it just says we're going to remove wet materials, that kind of a thing. Now, if you end up finding that you end up having to remove a lot more than you thought, change order time, okay? Cool thing about Helix Code too is once your ROM has been signed off on by the client, if that's the process that you have, some people are working under a third-party administrative or managed repair type of program, and they signed off on it, whatever the case may be. Once you start actually doing your T&M in our program, you get to see where your ROM is at. It has a dollar amount there. And then if you're putting in, your guys are doing everything they do is they're putting in their equipment and their labor every day and their consumables, you're going to have your burn rate available. So when that consultant walks up to you or that adjuster and says, hey, what's your burn rate? You can pull your phone out and you can tell them exactly what your burn rate was as of yesterday. Burn rates do not stay the same. Obviously, they fluctuate based on what's going on the job, how many guys, how much, so on and so forth. But it gives you a good idea. Cool thing then too, though, is with Helix, you start seeing that gap is getting tight. You still got a lot of work to do. Did you remember to do change orders? And so that's a feature that we're going to be adding into our software next year is that if you do a change order, then you can adjust that ROM dollar amount once it's been approved. Okay. That way you can visually see where you're at. Then I want to talk about, in my ROM packet, I want to talk about how communication is going to go, daily communication, daily meetings, so on and so forth. This is how we're going to do. If we do a change order, we expect you to sign off and approve it before we actually do that work. Okay. If not, you may be shutting your stuff off after 2 weeks because you wrote your ROM for 2 weeks worth of runtime on your equipment. Power wasn't restored. You're not going to continue stabilizing without a signature. So you threatened to pull your equipment. I'm sorry, I want to pull my equipment off this job site if you don't sign this change order. And then what happens after that is on you. It's in my contract. You've got to sign this change order if you want us to continue working. So then I basically talk about any kind of hazardous material testing, let them know that you're going to have asbestos testing before you do any removals, so on and so forth. Last thing I usually do is I definitely put in my exclusions. Some people put in the rough dollar amount first in this next section. Either way, format's up to you. As long as you got your dollar amount in there at some point. I like to have it once in my introductory paragraph, and I like to have it again spelled out at the end and refer them to my ROM packet, which is created in Helix Code or whatever estimating program that you're using. Hopefully it's Helix Code. But in exclusions, we're not addressing anything electrical. We're not addressing anything mechanical. We're not doing the roof, whatever the case may be for you. We're not doing any abatement. We're not doing any hazardous waste disposal, or at least those are not included in this number. Doesn't mean that you necessarily aren't going to do it. You just don't know if that hygienist is also going to be your moisture mapper, which I love to do on large projects, by the way. Frees my guys up to do what's important, which is produce the work. But, you may not have a quote yet. And so you can say this excludes this. We'll submit a change order once we have that quote. Okay. That's the way I prefer to do it. That way it's tight. Your numbers are there. They're good. They're solid numbers based on your actual scope of work. Then you make sure you have a place for them to sign it. And that's it. I mean, this is what protects you when you get out into the field. If you guys have any questions, reach out to me. You can send me an email or give me a phone call if you don't know me or DM me on social media. Thank you, guys.